Hello, I'm the Dark Master, and welcome back to my video reviews. In this video, we shall be reviewing the 7th game in the series, and the 5th spin-off game in the Kirby franchise. It is also the most obscure Kirby game made by Nintendo, having never received an English release or even a re-release period, that being none other than Kirby's Toy Box, or as it's known in the Japanese original, Kabi no Omacha Bako. Is this any good, or does it deserve its obscurity? Well, to find out, let us start with some developmental history. Alright, so actually, to be honest, very little is known about this game's development. To put into perspective how obscure this game is, when Masahiro Sakurai, who's basically the creator of Kirby and its sort of god figure, during a Smash Brothers interview was asked about the game, he said he had never seen the game, which is just astounding given his genuine care for his creations. That he would not know about this game, just wow, really. To put in perspective how obscure and poorly documented further that this game is that of the 10 sub-games that are, part of this game, 2 have never been properly recorded or saved in any manner, those being a prototype demo of the Samurai Kirby and Megaton Punch minigames of Kirby Superstar, which was developing at around the same time. Due to the lack of proper records, there is some debate on if these are exactly the same or if they have some prototype elements. Regardless, they are considered some pretty big cases of lost media and are worth mentioning, I think, at least. Who knows, maybe somebody watching this has it on their hard drive and they can share it. You never know. The only staff member we really know actually worked on this game was Takane Okubo, who made a unique soundtrack for one of the games, but I'll cover that later on this video. Regardless of the mysterious development cycle, this game would be released on February 8th, 1996 for the Satellaview, which was a peripheral that functioned as a sort of satellite modem for the SNES, called the Super Famicom in Japan, that was created in collaboration between Nintendo and the Satellite Digital Audio Broadcast Company. And it ended up being a financial disaster due to several factors that included a Japanese-only release, being only sold via mail order instead of in stores. There was a small recession at the time, and new 5th-gen consoles made the whole thing entirely obsolete. Now, you might be wondering why I'm discussing this and not the sales of the game. Well, that's because this game wasn't really sold per se. Rather, it was available to play for a limited time via the service. So, given the status of the game, sales figures don't really apply here. It can be assumed, however, to have not been very successful and not had many people play it due to the financial failure of the Satellaview and, the obscurity it is these days. But what about the story? How's that? Well, you fool! There is no story. This is just a collection of self-contained minigames with no connective tissue at all. So instead, let us dive straight into the gameplay of this game. Arguably the most important aspect of, well, any game. How is that? So each of the mini games has their own gameplay. First, there is Pinball, which takes concepts from Kirby's Pinball Land, which I've already reviewed if you want to learn more, but with only a single board and there are no bosses. Honestly, it's fun, but without the bosses, it's just your typical pinball game. Nothing particularly amazing or groundbreaking, just get as many points as you can. Though I have to admit that the ball mechanics here are better than the 8-bit game due to the improved processing capabilities, but there's no ending. You just play until either you lose or you get bored. With Starbreaker, we see a similar gameplay to Kirby's Block Ball, which is another game that I've reviewed before, so check that out if you want to learn more. Though in place of paddles, you get a trampoline that is held by what appears to be two separate ricks. There's 5 stages, which vary mostly by the exact positioning of various colored stars. Honestly, for as short as it is, the controls are a step up from Block Ball. Plus, only having one axis to worry about means it's easier to keep track of Kirby. The 6th stage is an encounter against King Dedede. It's not really a boss fight, but I'll talk about it later on in this video. Round and Round Ball is a game where you have to time and aim Kirby balls in order to land in certain holes. The first hole gives 10 points, the second gives 500 points, third gives 200 points, the fourth gives 100 points, and the last only gives 50 points. If you get a score of 5,000, you get a bonus Kirby to fire. Honestly, it's perfectly fine for what it is. It's nothing particularly special. In fact, it kind of reminds me of those old browser games that you would play. You know the ones, like Jewel Quest, that sort of stuff. It's pretty mindless. I guess it's a little fun when you're trying to get as much points as you can, but there's not really a lot of substance to it. Pachinko is, well, a minigame inspired by pachinko. To explain what pachinko is, it's basically a Japanese equivalent of a slot machine gambling device where a ball is released by a spring-loaded mechanism that then falls down an area with brass pins, and if it hits the right spot, you win a bunch of prizes. It's a lot more complicated than that, but I don't really feel I need to go more in depth than that, and besides, you don't get prizes from this. You are given an unlimited number of Kirby balls to score as many points as possible in 120 seconds or 2 minutes. Due to the simplistic physics, it can be rather easy to figure out the right angle to score a lot of points. It's somewhat brain dead. A range ball is another pachinko style game, though it takes more inspiration from the A1 LSI range ball, which was an old electronic handheld game popular at the time in Japan. Despite the shared connections these two games have, it does have quite a number of differences. First, you're only given 9 Kirbys that you must hit into a 3x3 set of holes, from which you can get a row, a column, or diagonal akin to what you'd see in the game that this game takes inspiration from. Cannonball sees Kirby fighting in a giant mechanical robot inspired by the hamster Rick, where you must use the D-pad to angle the mouth as well as move. Each robot can take 6 hits, and the damage is indicated by the color of the mech. It gets redder the closer to death you are. These cannon attacks can be blocked by these horizontally floating clouds for some reason, despite these same attacks being able to harm machines and destroy the terrain, which can corner the robot as for some reason they can't move over damaged terrain. It's a fun if simple game and is technically multiplayer, though given the state of the game now, you can only really fight against a CPU at this time. It's fine enough, but the inability to do multiplayer really hampers it. Ball Rally sees the player have to use the A button to alter various extensions and retractions of various different green platforms in order to get points for each ball, making it to the goal while avoiding spikes. Each consecutive one doubles the bonus multiplier, 2, 4, 8, etc., etc., which resets if one of the balls is destroyed by the spikes. and towards the end of the game, big DDD balls show up that are worth 100 points. Honestly, it's a really fun mini game. It's really a challenge to try and get as many balls to the goal, especially as they get faster later on. It's genuinely perhaps my favorite of all the games in this collection. The eighth and last minigame is baseball, which, true to its name, is based off the real life game of baseball, albeit very loosely. You have Kirby that you have to hit by a baseball bat into several goals. Those with hit, two base, or three base cause all present Kirbys to move and are colored blue. Hitting the home run causes all Kirbys to do a home run. If you hit the red goal marked out or the gray ones marked foul, you get a strike. Three of those and you get an out. Three outs and the game is over. Now, in principle, this should be fun, but sadly, the bat swings so slowly and delayed, it's just obnoxious to play, and it's not fun at all. There's also a two-player mode, but that no longer really has any value given the status of the game. Overall, I would consider it probably the weakest of all the mini games. I just didn't particularly enjoy it. Overall, though, outside of the last one, the gameplay is, for the most part, rather simplistic, yet also pretty fun, though it does depend on what specific game you're playing, and also depends on your expectations. Now let us go over the presentation of the game. How is that? Starting with the first half, those being the graphics. Alright, so as an SNES game, Kirby's Toy Box does have quite the step up from the 8-bit games that I've reviewed, and overall each mini-game has some neat visuals. These include the last appearance for the mini-boss Ifriti, not counting a cameo in Kirby's Triple Deluxe, Mr. Frosty, who seems to be hanging on for dear life. Either that or his body is unusually long. Kirby in a baseball cap is pretty neat, and the robot hamsters are kind of just an amazing design, and I hope they return at some point. It's not all perfect, though. Something about the deity design just feels off. It might be the eyes or the overall childlike proportions. He just seems dead inside. Overall, the graphics are perfectly fine. Nothing outstanding, but they're still visually interesting. But now, let us go to the other half of the presentation, that being the music. Is the music of this game any good, or is it forgettable? Well, let's see. The game's OST is rather meager. Most of the background music and sound effects are just taken from Kirby's Dream Course, which I've already reviewed if you're interested. And well, given that I liked that soundtrack, it does admittedly sound pretty good, even if it's completely unoriginal. There are two exceptions to this. The title theme is a really rocking remix of the title theme from Kirby's Adventure. It's honestly rather cool, and I suggest you watch my review of that game if you want to learn more. Only the Starbreaker theme has any uniqueness to it, and it's a neat highlight that I talked about earlier. Overall, though, the OST for this game is pretty weak, and nothing much worth talking about further. Now let us go to the enemies of this game, and there are a few. Surprisingly, there are some enemies, albeit they are limited to only two of the eight games. For the pinball game, there is Krakow and Code Krakow that serve the role as bumpers and give 30 and 50 points per hit, respectively. Waddle Doo gives 100 points, Bounder gives 30 points and can occasionally block your access to certain areas. Hatched Chicks give 100 points and 1,000 points when hit 4 times. Elil gives 100 points. Mr. Frosty gives 300 points and then 1,000 points if hit 5 times, plus adds a ×1 to the bonus. King Dedede is the hardest to hit and gives 300 points or 1,000 points if hit 5 times, and adds a ×5 to the bonus multiplier. Speaking of the king, in Starbreaker, he appears as an encounter during the 6th stage, where he floats in an air, moving in circles, and will every so often limply throw a hammer, which can stun the hamster for a short period of time after it hits. But honestly, it's very easy to dodge, and after 6 hits, he's dead, and the game loops. Honestly, this fight is really easy. In fact, I'd barely even call it a fight. With that being said, I would like to explain why this encounter was not on my every Dedede fight ranked video. One, it's not really a full-blown fight. The game just loops. It's beneath even the encounters in Kirby's Pinball Land. Also, when I made that video, I hadn't quite figured out how to play this game yet. And I don't really feel comfortable talking about something that I haven't played. Overall, the enemy selection is pretty meager and again, pretty sad. Nothing really worth talking about. However, we now talk about the completion requirements and my final thoughts, I want you to keep in mind that I didn't play that game because I didn't know how to get into it back then, as it actually plays a role in the completion requirements and my conclusion. Psych, there are no completion requirements. Rather, it's a compilation of mini-games that you can reasonably beat them all in an hour. Being so short, I'd say that you wouldn't really lose much giving it a try at least once if you're a Kirby fan. However, the issue is that it's actually rather hard to play. It was only ever released in February 8th, 1996 for the Satellaview and has never been officially re-released ever again, meaning that you gotta rely on some pretty hard to find ROMs, which even I struggle to find in order to record footage for this video. And is it really worth it for a collection of minigames that again only last about an hour? If you can find it, I definitely think they're worth giving a shot, but honestly, don't feel too bad if you decide to skip it as you can't find it, and you can't even play the whole game as 2 of the minigames have been lost. It's not a bad game, but nothing special. Overall, I'm the Dark Master, and if you like this video, like it, but if you loved it, consider subscribing, as next time we shall be covering what may well be the best classic Kirby game of them all. Have a nice day.